Welcome everyone back to A to Z podcast, an Ultraman podcast where we talk about everything Ultraman under the sun. I am John and Orgime, and I'm always joined by my lovely co-host.
Hello, everyone. It is Dr. Swooce, the scientist, the madman without a plan, and the doctor of disaster. Now, my good man Gaim, what is our topic for today?
Since our first episode was kind of an introduction on who we are, what we kind of like to do, our Toku journey, as I worded it.
Mm-hmm.
This episode, I want to do a little bit something different and kind of give like a overview of the Ultraman franchise, not going into detail in any one particular place, but just kind of a bird's eye view of what the past 55 years of Ultraman has looked like.
So, essentially, we're going to start at the beginning and then go to where we are now just by taking bits and pieces and saying, hey, here's this happened here. And, just trying maybe like brief glimpses into each season.
Yeah, pretty much. And
Okay.
For those individuals who have found our podcast because they're Ultraman fans and they're searching out Ultraman related media, a lot of this is going to be stuff they already know.
Right.
But that's possible that people are just now getting into Ultraman, especially with the new wave of fans from Ultraman Z.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to kind of dive in a little bit more about Ultraman and don't really know where to start because it has been going on for 55 years. So I want to kind of paint a little bit of a picture of what they can expect from different series and where they can go to kind of find a series that matches their sensibilities, like what they're kind of into, their tastes and tones.
So, almost here's each Ultraman. What's your Ultra?
Yeah, a little bit like that. But if we want to go ahead and get into it, I've kind of started with a little bit of like, what is Ultraman? We've said his name a lot, but what is an Ultraman?
I know this one. It's a man, and he's very ultra.
Yes, that is not incorrect.
Yes.
But basically, Ultraman, as the franchise is concerned, is a sci-fi special effects franchise that consists around a giant alien coming from space and landing on Earth to fight other giant-sized monsters.
Otherwise called kaiju.
Yeah, so very much like the Godzilla films of the Showa era, these are men in suit fighting another man in suit. And as far as the human characters are concerned, Ultraman usually merges with a human host so that this alien can stay on Earth for an extended period of time.
Right, something to do with their energy on Earth can't be sustained, right?
Yeah. So the fights generally last about 3 minutes because they have a color timer on their chest that blinks when their energy starts depleting. So for the character to stay on Earth's atmosphere for any period of time, they have to go in like a dormant state inside of a human host. And that's the general framing device around the plot for any given season.
I mean, but I don't know if it's true for a lot of the Showa series, but some, especially the new generation, have not say gotten away from that, but had exceptions to that, right?
Right. And there's going to be exceptions that we'll touch in on later, but I'm just speaking in broad terms here. Like, for example, I think all of the Showa series, I'm not entirely sure because I haven't seen them all, but most of the series have a sort of science patrol like militaristic team that uses um high tech technology and fighter jets, and the Ultraman host is usually a part of this team, so the audience is able to follow along with them going on their journey.
So it's more like, so I guess so we can relate. It's a group of humans that they're doing something. Like it doesn't necessarily have to be like, oh, we're the anti-kaiju squad. We're like, we're just people who are doing things that are tangential to whatever is going on in the overall plot. And sometimes he's associated. Sometimes he's just kind of like a arm's length associated. Isn't that right?
Yeah, exactly. So the general basis is that the character is usually associated with the science team,
Mm-hmm.
but in order to create differences from series to series, they deviate from said formula. Kind of like in Super Sentai, where you generally have a team of 5, and you have that set formula. Then somewhere in 10 episodes, you get a 6th quote unquote ranger coming in, but of course there's always seasons that deviate from that.
Oh, so
So
kind of
this,
like in that, like in for the Super Sentai one, like you say, or I say more related to Power Rangers, I would say, Mighty Morphin's like, oh, we're this secret organization led by an alien. Well, I say organization, that's a bit broad since there's only 5 of them. But you know, Super Force by the head Zordon. But then you get the later episode seasons, like in space, where it's like, well, we're just intergalactic people who are powered up,
hmm.
right?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I'm not entirely sure what you meant by that, but yeah,
Well, I
we'll,
mean,
we'll
like
go with that.
it's like clearly different bases. Like, okay, clearly the same thing's going on, but it's all different formatting. You know, it's like, oh, we're still a team, but what the team does, what it's about, whether or not it's openly public oriented or not, it's like all the factors are different. So it keeps a fresh take on something that's technically the same.
Yeah, that I'd say that's a fair assessment. They tend to deviate a little bit from they set up this formula and they follow the formula, but the interesting bits is how they deviate from the formula.
Right.
So it's like, for example, oh, this time for the Super Sentai example, oh, this time we're starting with 9 Rangers instead of 5. For example, with Q Ranger.
Or even a bit more recently than that, this time we have 2 teams instead of 1.
Right. So it's the deviations from that formula is what helps differentiate series to series and what makes it a little bit more interesting, I would say. But before we kind of get into a little bit more about each series, I want to kind of explain a little bit how we name and classify these series. So,
Oh, like grouping them together for their overall categories, right?
right. So, you're familiar with this, but
Yes.
we refer to the older stuff as the Showa series. And then we have the Heisei series. And then here recently, we have the Reiwa. But that's named based off of, in Japan, they name their years off of the emperor's reign.
Mm-hmm.
So the Showa era was from 1926 to 1989. And then starting in 89, the Heisei era began and went until 2019.
Mm-hmm.
In May of 2019, a new emperor took the throne and began the Reiwa era. They still use our year system. It's not uncommon to see something written coming out in 2021,
Right.
but you can almost as often find something where it says Reiwa Year 3.
Really?
It's not uncommon to see that.
I actually have never noticed that. I mean, I don't pay attention to a lot of the Japanese calendars type stuff, and I can't read Japanese really, so that kind of textual stuff will just go over my head. That's actually really interesting. I didn't realize that they have like a parallel calendar dating system.
Right. So specifically for like formal documents and governmental documents and official things, it's going to be written Reiwa Year 3.
I see.
But in anything that's like pointed outward, like for example, like movie releases that the trailers might circulate worldwide, it might probably just say just coming 2021.
Mm-hmm. So it's almost the internal versus external publication.
Right. But I also think it's as common internally for both. You just won't see the Reiwa Year 3 thing for external.
Okay. That's actually really fascinating. I didn't know that part of it.
Right. So when we talk about media that comes from a certain era, we say, oh, that show was from the Showa era. That's a Showa series. Or this series was from the Heisei era.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we can kind of classify and divide up these series. With these kinds of fandoms, they tend to add extra classifications.
Right, after it gets so big, right?
What was that?
Well, after like so many things go into the group, you kind of have to.
Right, and I'll get into that a little bit. For example, with Godzilla, starting with Godzilla 2000, the film, that movie and everything following it is referred to as the Millennium series, while everything prior, starting with I think 1984, was called the Heisei series. Even though the Millennium series took place during the Heisei era, they add a different classification to it for the sake of clarity, because they're two different continuities.
I see. So it also has to do almost with like it could be subdivided in plot or like connection to each other. Like this is like a new universe, I guess is the way to describe it.
Right. There is a deviation between these, so they're using a different a different category to differentiate between the two.
I see. Okay. So are we you said we're currently still in Millennium? Is that still true, or have we split again?
No. The Millennium ended in I think 2004.
Oh.
When the Godzilla Final Wars was the last film for a while.
So
I think they're referring. I think that they're referring to the new stuff as just the Reiwa era films, but I'm still new to Godzilla, so if I'm wrong with that, forgive me. I'm way more new to Godzilla than I am anything else Toku related. But as far as Kamen Rider's concerned,
their naming convention's super easy. Like, well, I guess there is a bit of weird time frame for stuff. Like all the series, as far as like television shows go, if their era pretty much just falls in line, like everything from before Kuga is just Showa.
Right. Even though they were made in the Heisei era.
Well, some of the movie specials, like Zeto.
Yeah, I'm specifically talking about Zeto and Shin.
I think J too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, all of them are Showa technically, even though they're not. But I think it's because Kamen Rider kind of died for a little while. We won't get into that, but when the shows started coming back, They were already a few years into Heisei, so I was like, oh, this is now the Heisei generation, and that went from technically it goes from Kuga all the way to Gyo, but there is a split in there as well because the first 10 are referred to as Heisei, but from double on, it's referred to as Neo Heisei. And I think that has something to do with product marketing. That's how it's divided. But also could have something to do with how the 10th show, Decade, was literally like a centennial, or not centennial, decadial, I don't know, 10 years. And they grouped them all together and said, here's this guy who has all these powers. We're segmenting off this segment and done. And they even did that again with Gyo because his was like more overreaching of the whole Heisei.
Correct. And I also think part of the Zeto and the J and Shin distinction is that those films match the Showa tone a lot more than they match the Heisei tone. So they are also... Go ahead.
I'm inclined to agree with you, except you've never seen Kuga.
That's true.
Kuga and Agito actually make a good bridge between the two because you can begin to see the transitions.
Right.
I think, I don't know, Ryuki was still had dark moments. I don't think the show started getting more light until maybe really Phase, and even then, Phase is a fun show, but Phase is also dark. But I once again digress.
Right.
This is about Ultraman, not Kamen Rider.
Yeah. But I'm just pointing out that there are additional classifications on top of the actual eras.
Right.
And Ultraman also has an additional classification. On top of the Showa and the Heisei era. Starting with 0 forward, they're referred to as the new generation heroes.
But Zero didn't have his own show. He was all specials based, correct?
Correct. And I would also say that 0 was more or less the bridge between the Heisei and the new generation heroes, because 0's more or less present throughout the whole new generation. So I would include him just as much, if not more so, than the other new generation heroes.
Right.
So he's very much a bridge. But this distinction's not just like a fan distinction, because Subaraya themselves used the classification as new generation heroes.
No, like totally, because even in I want to say Jeed, 0 got a new form called the New Generation form, right? Well, it wasn't called that, but the item he used literally had the moniker New Generation in it, if I remember correctly. Like the capsules.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I cannot remember specifically what it's called, but yes. I was also the more apparent thing that I was thinking of was Ultra Galaxy Fight New Generation Heroes. That's the name of the title. And then Taiga's movie is New Generation Climax. So the fact that it's used adds a little bit of validity to it.
Right.
Specifically for the Godzilla distinction. Well, I'm not entirely sure if Toho uses the terminology as the Millennium Series. They might. I'm not sure about that. But for Kamen Rider, the whole Neo Heisei era distinction is completely fans.
Yes, because even like in I think it was Gaim, they had a whole movie that was Heisei versus Showa, but they didn't like discriminate Heisei into Neo Heisei. It was like, nope, these are all Heisei and these are all Showa. And
right.
But it helps the fans divide it up.
Yeah, and I've also seen a lot of arguments based on that, because there are the people who strictly go with the namesake and was like, the Heisei era at that point, the Heisei era hasn't stopped. It's still the Heisei era. There is no new Neo Heisei. That doesn't exist. And then you have other people saying, yeah, we know it doesn't exist, but it just helps classify the different series a little bit more descriptively. Which I don't really care one way or the other. I'm not gonna scream at you for using the terminology as long as you admit, like, yeah, we know you're not going to go onto a Japanese calendar and see the Neo Heisei era.
Right.
It doesn't exist.
I like the naming convention. I know it's not entirely appropriate, but it fits. And it's a nice, clean split because there was exactly 20 seasons for Heisei.
Yeah,
I don't think that was on purpose.
I also agree. I don't find it as annoying as some other people. There's a lot of arguments that will start just over this stupid name, you know?
People argue about anything, but at least it's a lot more clean than the Ultraman one because, like, while I think that calling them New Generation's fine, there's no, like, real clear split of when this opened up. And we're still technically in New Generation for Ultraman. Like, at what point now do we move into whatever comes next?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess time will tell.
Yeah.
But that being said, I personally add a little bit more distinction to the Ultraman classification. You'll probably hear me say early Heisei, referring to Tiga and anything prior to Zero as a further distinction between the New Generation and what came before it. Because they're all Heisei era with the exclusion of Taiga and Zet. Those are Reiwa, but excluding those two, they're all Heisei. So you might hear me say early Heisei when I'm referring to Tiga, Dyna, Gaia, stuff like that, just personally.
Right.
But yeah, that kind of, now that we have naming conventions out of the way for those who are new to this, we can get into the Showa era where it started. So it starts with Eiji Tsuburaya, who is the special effects director for the original 1954 Gojira, or Godzilla. And he worked on quite a lot of films at Toho. At some point, he left Toho because he wanted to create his own company. And there is a ton of backstory around all of this, and we'll get into that later. I want to do a whole creation of Ultraman episode talking about all that stuff. But
yeah, we'll talk in depth just about Tsuburaya at some point. I think we could probably do a whole thing just on that.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to bog it down too much with this. All I'll say is, when they got to the point of creating their own show, they made a show for TBS, which is the Toku broadcasting system, not the Turner broadcasting system, as we know TBS to be. They created a show based on the American shows Outer Limits and The Twilight Zone called Ultra Q. Ultra Q was a monster of the week kind of show, which will be prevalent in the series to follow.
I wonder why.
But it was based off of these 3 or 4 human characters dealing with extraordinary circumstances. Sometimes it's an alien invasion. Sometimes it's a giant monster that came out of the ground. Sometimes it's something else. But
something else. I feel like that covers everything. What's something else?
I guess you'll just have to watch and find out, won't you?
This is how he got me to watch Ultraman, by the way.
So basically, this show was such a success. TBS was like, make more, please. Make us more show. And he was like, okay, but this time I want it to be a little bit different. I want to have a good monster fighting a bad monster that we could follow week to week. And this show went through several versions we'll cover later, but they pretty much settled on a humanoid alien shape versus a monster with a traditional like kaiju style.
Now, on that, I actually have a question, because you may or may not know this. You said they settled on a humanoid shape. Was Ultraman almost a kaiju himself?
Yes.
Really? Do we know what that was like at all? Like, do we know, like, maybe even specifics, like what he may have looked like? Are we to assume he was closer to maybe looking like a Godzilla type creature? Just what do we know anything about that at all?
Yes, we do. I don't know the name off the top of my head.
Mhm.
I have forgotten it. But his design was later repurposed into an actual kaiju.
Really?
Yes. Not for this series. It was for a different series. But the designer reused the design for something else.
Oh, so he wasn't even used in Ultraman ultimately?
That's correct.
Oh. Huh. Now I'm really curious. I have to find this out later. Okay, we'll cover this, I think, in the Ultraman episode. Let's
this
make a
is
note
very
of that,
much.
'cause I'm
this
actually
is very
really
much,
interested in this.
Right. Sorry.
No,
This is very much Discord lag, man. We end up talking over each other.
Oh no.
But yeah, so this is very much territory for the Ultraman episode alone.
Stay tuned.
Right. We will cover this at some point. So they made Ultraman. Same thing. Make us another show. Do a season 2. This is fantastic. Okay, I'll do more, but let's do something different. I got a better idea for you. So that's when they swapped to Ultra 7.
Oh, buddy. And did some cool stuff come from him in a way?
Yeah. Some people will say Ultra 7's probably their favorite series. And
I haven't seen it.
because I am not very far in it, honestly. I am working my way through it right now. Every season is someone's favorite season because there's something that connects them to it. You know, it might be the show that was on when they first started watching Ultraman.
Right.
Or it might be a character that resonates with them more. Or it might be a kaiju design that they absolutely love. So every season is someone's favorite. And I've heard Ultra 7 being one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a tidbit of information you might not actually know. Ultra 7 wasn't originally supposed to be in this connected Ultraman universe.
Really?
Yeah, it was its own thing.
I guess that's why he's not Ultraman Ultra 7. He's just Ultra 7.
Right. And it wasn't until later that they decided to fold that in and just make it the entire continuity. But after Ultra 7, they come out with Return of Ultraman, which has been, he's referred to as Ultraman Jack in everything that follows, but he isn't referred to as Ultraman Jack in the series itself. It's just a different Ultraman, and they know him as Ultraman.
Huh. That's pretty interesting. And that's also the one where Zophie's from, right?
No.
No? Oh.
Mm-mm.
See, I don't know. Show us stuff. Please educate me. Or maybe maybe that segues into the next thing we're talking about.
I don't want to tell you where Zophie's from.
Oh, all right. Well, never mind.
I don't want to ruin the surprise for you.
Stay tuned where he doesn't ruin it for me, but we'll ruin it for all of you next episode.
No. No, so after Ultraman Ace, or sorry, after Return of Ultraman, we get Ultraman Ace, and then we get Ultraman Taro,
Mm-hmm.
and then after Ultraman Taro, we get the anime series called The Ultraman. Now, you might be familiar with this slightly because he makes his first suited appearance in Ultraman, or sorry, Ultra Galaxy Fight The Absolute Conspiracy, which just finished airing as we're recording this. So you remember seeing that?
Oh, the guy with the star, right? Jonius?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Ultraman Jonius. So this is the anime about him.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, he was pretty neat. I still need to finish that. I haven't seen the last episode.
Right.
But
And
he
then
seemed like a cool-
after that, that was in '79, and then to end out the show era, we got Ultraman 80, airing in 1980. I wonder why his name is called that.
He came to us from the stars.
Yes, I love that song.
That's part of his theme song, by the way, in case you're wondering where that came from. Like, and that's in
Right.
English too. Like, if you listen to his theme song, there's a part in it that he just says that, and unbroken, really clear English. I don't know why that came about, but it did.
Because he came to us from the stars.
Yeah, but why
I
did
mean-
they choose just that line to put in English?
I don't know. Maybe you needed to know that.
I guess they wanted everybody to know.
Yeah, so I kind of breezed through the Showa era, mainly because I haven't seen most of it. Like I spoke about in our episode 1, it wasn't until recently that I've actually gotten into the Showa era of Ultraman, because both me and Swooce have had this bias against the Showa era series. So I have seen the regular 1966 Ultraman. I've seen a couple episodes of Ultraman, Ultra Q, and I am currently in the middle of watching Ultra 7. But I am nowhere near far enough to give any kind of opinions on it.
Yeah, and I've barely watched the first Ultraman. I'm enjoying it, but those shows, we were actually talking about this before we started recording. It's really interesting that the psychology of the shows, like, and what they are built for is so different, because the way the shows are oriented today, you want to binge and shotgun all of them. But the old Ultraman, like, you can watch an episode, and after you watch it, like, not like whether or not you enjoyed it at all. Usually I do enjoy them, but after I watch one, I'm like, I'm done. I don't really want to watch another one.
It's filling. It's like a complete meal.
Yeah, it's very satisfying just to watch the episode, which I think now, after being able to make this observation, I think that's why there's a bit of disconnect between the generations that watch them, because that's what they want. They want one and done episodes versus what we have now.
I hadn't thought about that. That might be part of it. The thing that sticks out to me is that because, and I'm referring to specifically Ultra Q, Ultraman, and Ultra 7,
Mm-hmm.
because I think those are the ones that Tsuburaya worked on himself. And then I think everything past that, his son took over. But because I think he passed away somewhere around that time. I don't have my dates. Don't take that with a grain of salt. For those episodes, I'll have all that written out so I can provide you accurate information. But the point I'm trying to make here is, because he worked on Godzilla and those early Toho films, he designed these episodes to be like a 30-minute complete film. So every week you got a 30-minute complete film. So you got your fill, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you.
But shows now, they're so bingeable because that's just our culture with like Netflix and streaming services. We just binge shows. That's what we do. We find a show we want to watch and we sit there and just binge right through it. But it's just kind of harder to do that with the older shows, and it's not that I'm not enjoying them. I'm loving what I'm seeing. It's just I'm full. You know, it's like you're eating a big old piece of pie.
Yeah, like a lot of the newer episodes, it's like there's this whole narrative that's going on, and it's like you want to know what's happening next. It doesn't feel like it's finished.
Yeah,
And then like
it leaves breadcrumbs for you.
and like some of the episodes, even still, like even if they're open and closed episodes, it's like, well, there's still this overarching narrative that's going on, and even if the episode had nothing to do with that, and like it may make good standalone episodes, it's like, well, that's like having a piece of toast before you eat your meal. Like it doesn't satisfy you. It's just to hold you over to what comes next.
Right, that's true. And the analogy I was going to throw out is the older Showa episodes are a piece of pie. You've eaten your slice and you're satisfied. The new series are candy, and you just keep popping another piece. You know, let me get another piece of candy, another piece of candy, another piece of candy.
I guess that's
You
the
know
way.
what I'm saying?
I know. I guess that's the way. I don't know. These food analogies are making me hungry. But yeah, it's like definitely the difference between a full serving versus a I don't know, eating 3 square meals a day versus eating 9 miniature meals throughout the day. I don't know, that's a weird analogy, but that's also food. Why are we doing food analogies?
I think we're just hungry.
We are now. I ate lunch before we came here.
Yeah, food analogies will do that for you. I talk about what I know. I know food.
Let's be talking about Ultraman anyway.
That's true.
We've gotten off on this tangent, but the point is, they satisfy differently.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And if I was doing this podcast a year ago, I'd probably just say the Showa era stuff's not for me. That's cool if you like it. It's not for me. I don't care about it.
Shoot, last year, if we had done this a month earlier, I would have said that.
Well, I mean, a month earlier it was last year.
Shut up. It's it's almost the next month. Quiet.
But yeah, so I've recently grown a appreciation for it, and I intend to make it through all of these series at some point and do episodes on them. I intend to watch every series at some point. I have watched quite a lot, but there's nowhere near close to watching them all. And my long-term goal is to watch them all and to cover them at some point.
I don't plan on it, but somehow I'm going to end up doing it.
By the twist of the arm.
Not even going to be that. It's going to be I'm bored. Oh, hey, I have all of the seasons available because good releases.
Yeah. So let's transition away from the Showa era stuff.
Right. So after Showa era, what is the next era and who does it start with?
Well, it's a little weird because 80 marked the end of consecutive releases for a while.
Really?
And there was a bunch of just little random stuff just sprinkled in. There was several like chibi anime. There was even a cat-related anime.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I've tried to find it. It's kind of hard to find, but there was a lot of random just sprinkled bits.
Is this where Ultra Nice comes in? Or is he later?
No, he was actually around the time of Tiga.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
but it's that kind of content.
Yeah, it's just kind of like one-off things. And at the beginning here, before we get into Tiga, which is viewed as the beginning of the Heisei era, there were a few things prior to that.
Okay.
this was a little bit before the effects of the lawsuit that we'll talk about at some point that kind of stopped them from spreading into like the Western audience. But before all that stuff kind of started happening, they did try to release Western Ultraman twice. The first one was Ultraman Towards the Future, and this was a Australian co-production. So all of the actors are Australian.
Wait, so is this
And
like
they
a whole new
speak-
show?
Yeah.
Oh, I was thinking it was like, just when I think tried to bring it to the West, I always think what they did with, of course, your Mighty Morphin or the Kamen Rider show that was RX but really bad.
Right. Master Rider.
Yeah, Master Rider.
No, they actually made their own show. It was a shorter show. It was like a 12 or 13 episode miniseries. But it was called Ultraman Towards the Future, and it was referred to as Ultraman Great when they released it in Japan. This was an Australian production. It aired on Australian television, and it also aired on American television. So if you were a child at this point, which we weren't born yet, but if you were a child at this point, you would have seen Ultraman on television. And it was this. I actually really enjoy this show. We'll cover it at some point.
Okay.
I've got a lot to say about it, but it's a good show. And then a few years later, they tried to do it again, but they wanted to do an American production. This is an interesting story, an episode all on its own. But due to terrible production problems, will suffice it to say, it turned out that it could have been a little bit better than what we ended up with. Needless to say, it never aired on American television. So an American production that never aired on American television.
So where did it air?
It only aired in Japan with subtitles.
What?
Yes.
That seems a bit odd, but okay.
This was called Ultraman the Ultimate Hero, or its Japanese name, Ultraman Powered. Yeah. Needless to say, the people who worked on it tried their best, but the people who were in charge of the American side did not exactly give them the resources they needed to make a decent show. I'll suffice it there. But
yeah,
we'll get into that on that episode. But I recently watched it, and it has good merits. It has some good stuff about it. It's just plagued with so many issues that a lot of people, that the general consensus with it is it's not a good show. But I personally think it's worth watching at some point. It just shouldn't be your first viewing of a Ultraman series.
So it's more one of those ones that's like, watch it if you have an appreciation for Ultra, not if you don't know what Ultraman is and you don't know if you're into the series yet.
Correct, because I honestly think it would turn you off.
Hey, look, it's that time period's version of Ginga. Disclaimer, I like Ginga. Moving on.
Right. But that you just put that in my head, there's actually a lot more parallels than you think. Anyway, we'll save that for another day. After that, there was a little bit of time off, and Subaraya comes together, and very much with like Kuga for Kamen Rider, starting a new chain of like consecutive shows. This is where when they released Tiga, he was so popular. This lines up with a new age of consecutive shows. While prior we just had one-offs up until before 80. You know what I'm saying?
I see. Okay, so that's why you brought up Kamen Rider before.
Right.
Because
So
it's kind of the same situation.
right. So we get Tiga, which is extremely popular. I've yet to see it. I'm kind of waiting on Mill Creek's release of Tiga to get into it, but it's up there on ones I want to watch.
To be fair, that's like the only real way to watch them right now.
Yeah.
But it's coming at some point. We'll get it one day.
Right. So Tiga started a whole new generation of fans for Ultraman. And they even did a American dub of it on the Fox box, I believe, in America.
This sounds familiar, but I don't remember.
I remember seeing it on TV and never catching it, but I remember ads for it. But the dub was done as a satire, or like they weren't the dubbing wasn't taking it serious. Like the kind of things where they're just sitting here doing sarcastic comments to each other and making fart jokes, and they're talking about how ridiculous this whole thing is, and the fact that they're trying to do the whole self-aware thing, but it just comes off as arrogant, and it comes off as they don't really care about the property, or at least that's the way I interpret it.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
And it wasn't popular either. They didn't even finish it. I think it was I don't think they finished the dub. I think it was cut off before they finished it. Or if they finished the dub, I don't think they aired it all. Either way, I can't remember. But so Tiga shows up. Next year they have Ultraman Dyna. And then the next year they have Ultraman Gaia. Tiga and Dyna exist in the same universe, but Gaia takes place in its own thing, but they do cross over quite a lot. There's a lot of content of those three interacting, like movies and specials and whatnot. This is also a little bit of my blind spot. These are ones I want to watch, but I haven't gotten around to watching them yet.
Right.
After
their their releases don't quite exist yet, so it's a bit more difficult to find them.
Right. At one point in time, Gaia was on Crunchyroll, but I'm not entirely sure if he still is or not. After Gaia, they tried to do a thing rebooting the original Ultraman called Ultraman Neos. This was at the turn of the century, around 2000, because the main two characters was Ultraman Neos, which was a reboot version of the original Ultraman, and then Ultra 721, which was a reboot version of Ultra 7. He was called 2-1 because 21st century, and if being alive in the year 2000, a lot of things wanted to mark it on the turn of the century. You had Godzilla 2000. Tons of movies had the word 2000. Pokemon 2000. They put 2000 on a lot of stuff, or 21st century, stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, it's what you did. It literally marked the era because that's what everybody did. Just like how those fancy pants marked the 80s. What am I thinking of? Not bell bottoms. Maybe it was bell bottoms.
I don't know, dude. But yeah, after Neos, they did Cosmos, and Cosmos is an interesting one. He pretty much, for most Ultramen, the monster shows up, destroys the city, and Ultraman takes it down.
Mhm.
But Cosmos was the kind of character who didn't want to resort to killing the monster. If he could make it calm down or stop its rampage peacefully, he did
Pacify it.
that. Yeah, he would de-escalate the situation and only destroy the monster if he absolutely had to.
So he was very much sympathetic to the plight of, well, this creature exists in nature. It's just unfortunate that it's doing this now because of unforeseen circumstances.
Yeah. So, like I said, every series is someone's favorite, and I've heard that Ultraman Cosmos is a lot of people's favorite as well, but partly because of how different it is to the status quo.
Cosmos is my favorite Ultraman I've never seen.
Speaking of things that changed the status quo, the next series after that was Ultraman Nexus.
Oh, is that where Nexus comes in? Oh, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one we have seen episodes of, by the way.
I have seen all of Nexus. Swooce here has seen about 15 episodes. He's into it pretty deep.
I've without spoiling it, I've seen it up into the turning point, and those of you who've seen the show know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I would say the first turning point.
There's more than one.
But okay,
we're gonna have to keep watching these episodes.
Yeah, for sure. I love this show, and like I said, there is a huge fan base of Nexus online as well. Strangely enough, for some reason, China right now is releasing Chinese versions of Ultraman Nexus toys, and I assume that they're going to be airing the series like this year, which is strange because that show came out in like 04, 05, somewhere around there.
It's an interesting play, to be sure. I mean, heck, didn't we get VR Troopers way later? Or wait, what was it? What is the Japanese one? It's it's Beetleborgs Rust Metal Hero, right?
Yeah,
but
it's Metal Heroes.
Wasn't Metal Hero like way done by the time we got it?
Honestly, I think so. I think it was like the 80s.
Yeah. So like, I mean, you say it's weird, but the same thing happened in America with that show.
Yeah, but yeah, I guess you got a point there. See, the thing I was just thinking of was like that would be like reusing old footage, and they're not doing the Power Ranger thing where they add more footage. They're just going to like dub it or put subs on it.
Yeah, so, I suppose that's weird. It'd be like if they decided to suddenly dub who would be a good one? Tiga, and just, well, no, it's still Ultraman. Something else, Kuga. They dubbed Kuga and just threw it in the American audience. Like, it's really far gone past at this point. Like, that's 20 years ago.
But also they put brand new Ultraman Kuga toys on the shelves.
Yeah.
To go along with it. See, that's the interesting point to me. And I really like the ship in Nexus.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to try and pick up this Chinese release if it's any good. If it's not total crap, I'm going to try and pick that up because it on the aftermarket is absolutely outrageously priced.
Like, remember, everyone, hold on to your products that you get, because way down the road, like we said, it's always somebody's favorite, and they will want to come back and pick up product probably.
Yeah, and another thing too, like for toys on the shelves now, if you hold on to something 10, 15 years, when that kid who wanted that toy couldn't get that toy when he was a kid and he got his first job, he'll want to go and buy it. And if you still have it, you can sell it for a decent price. But that being said, Nexus is amazing. But I also don't recommend it being someone's first Ultraman.
It's too different from what Ultraman is. It is like, it's a good show. I love it so far. And it's not really something that's like, okay, you're gonna watch this and then you're gonna get something else, and then you're not really gonna appreciate the show. Like, that's kind of happened to Gaim here with Kamen Rider, because his first one, spoiler alert, was Gaim, and that one takes a very vastly different page than really any of the other ones I've seen. So
right,
it probably wasn't the best one to start you on, because now that's what you crave and you don't get it.
Exactly. And well, specifically with Gaim, the director was the same guy who did Madoka Magica. So if you know anything about that show, it's very much a deconstruction of the genre of magical girls. So it's a little bit darker, and it's not necessarily a satire because it's not like making fun of it. It's like pointing out things. Yeah, it's pointing things out about it, about the genre. And that's the same thing for Kamen Rider. He did the same thing for Kamen Rider Gaim. It's, you go in thinking it's one show, and then the ball drops and it turns into a completely different show. And it doesn't stop going until the very end. And it's just absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, because the show is like mega goofy at first. Like, like even the whole concept, which really the concept itself, this isn't a Kamen Rider show. I don't want to go into this super a lot. But as short as I can say, Kamen Rider Gaim, its whole thing is like they're fruit ninjas, literally. Like, they use these giant fruit powers, and it's super silly. And the only reason that they're fruits was literally because in the previous season, the main character ate donuts all the time, and a lot of parents complained.
Yeah, that's a true fact. That is a thing that happened.
But anyway, that's the bit I wanted to note on, that it's super mega ridiculous because of an unforeseen event, and it is not super silly by the end. Very good show, though. Moving on, back to Nexus, and what were we talking about?
Yeah, so the reason why we brought up Gaim is because it's a darker tone, and it puts a flavor in your mouth for what you expect more series to be like, but it's such a outlier for the rest of the franchise that if you don't like what you're given afterward, it can turn you off the whole franchise, which was what kind of happened with me for Kamen Rider, because I loved Gaim so much that getting Drive afterward and then doubling back to other shows, the shows being so different than Gaim, I just it took me a while to come around to it. So if you go into Nexus and absolutely loving it, and then you want more of that, most of Ultraman is not like that at all.
Yeah. So, like, great show. Be aware it's not like the rest of them, or don't watch it first.
Right. Yeah. So I definitely would not recommend it being a first show. But if you like Ultraman and you've watched a few shows and kind of get the gist of the franchise, watching it as an amazing departure of that, or a deviation on the formula, then it's a fantastic show to get into. Mm-hmm. This was kind of what I was talking about at the beginning, is like the franchise has a formula it follows. And the interesting bits about each different series is how they play with that formula, how they deviate from it, and what elements that they add in or subtract from.
Or, do what Nexus did and completely flip the script.
Yeah. That's my point.
That's an interesting deviation. I wouldn't recommend it for every season.
No. And if after Nexus we got nothing but that, I would not like the way that the franchise would have changed direction.
It's like if suddenly Kamen Rider turned into only Amazons.
Yeah. I don't want to get into that.
We won't get into that, I promise.
Ugh, man, I want to keep my stomach.
We went from talking about food and being sick at it. Let's go.
Yeah. So
Um,
after Nexus, we got Ultraman Max. Ultraman Max was a return to the status quo. It is a very quintessential Ultraman show. It returned to its roots, very happy, go lucky, family friendly. More or less, it was a course correction after Nexus, to say the least. After Max, we get Mebius, which is also a very popular series.
I've heard only good things.
You've heard things?
I've heard only good things.
Yeah. So the reason why I have not yet watched Mebius is because it's a celebration of the Showa era. It's a celebration of those series. And they even get a lot of the actors returning.
Oh, so you kind of want to like wait so you can get the full value.
Yeah, and
I see.
I think you can enjoy it for what it is on first viewing, but you'll get way more out of it if you have a connection with those Showa series. So my intention is to finish the Showa series and then watch Mebius.
I see. I feel that way about Decade.
Right. So after Mebius, that is the last like major Ultraman series with a titular Ultraman that we get until Ginga. This is kind of around the point of the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't necessarily have a lot of resources to be putting into a yearly show. They go on to a series called Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle, which is a really interesting show. I enjoyed it very thoroughly. But it's about a crew of like 5 or 6 characters on a spaceship. And they find a character who joins the team. And this character has a device that allows him to control kaiju like Pokemon.
I don't think I ever watched this one, did I?
No.
No.
So this main character, like Gomora, is actually more of the titular character, like titular good guy character fighting the other monsters than even like, because there's no actual Ultraman.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like Gomora, watch this show. You'll love Gomora.
I like Gomora. I mean, I only like him because of a different show, but I like him.
I love that kaiju. It's in my top 3 for sure. I don't know exactly where it falls, but it's in my top 3.
It kind of reminds me of Rodan, like older versions of Rodan.
Like in the head?
Yeah.
But say, because Rodan had wings.
Well, yeah, but I didn't mean the whole of him. He just looks like a friend. You know?
Yeah. I
Like
mean, I agree with that. I agree with Gomora looking like a friend, but I would not say Rodan looks very friendly.
Oh, well, look, I transitioned to 2 different thoughts, and you just got to keep up, man.
Oh. Okay. Well, moving on. About this time was when they shifted away from having a yearly series, and they would do movies and specials.
Mm-hmm.
So this is around the time when Zero is introduced. He's introduced in the Ultra Galaxy movie.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that follows afterward is his adventures. He doesn't get his own series, but he gets a series of movies and specials that allow you to follow his adventures.
Very
Later,
good.
they cut up all of the stuff that he was in into 30-minute chunks and create a said series for him called Zero the Chronicle. But it's just everything that he's appeared in chopped up and put into an episodic format. So I would just say just watch them in their natural state, you know?
Right.
But around 2013, they did a series called Neo Ultra Q, which was harkening back to the original show. It was just like a second season of Ultra Q with new actors, new characters, new stories. Just more of it. It's weird, to say the least.
I've only seen one episode of it, and I don't know how to feel about it. Like, I don't dislike it, but I don't think I like it either. It's like one of those things. Like, I definitely need to watch more than one episode to see how I feel about it. But it was interesting to watch the first episode. It's a gripping show. I'll give it that.
I've seen the whole thing, and I think it's only like 12 or 13 episodes. It's not many.
Mm-hmm.
I still don't know how I feel about it.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there's episodes I absolutely love. There's episodes I absolutely hate. And it just makes me a little uneasy.
Mm.
But that being the case, I think it was its intent. You know, like it did what it was trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the emotion that they're shooting for, then they knocked it out of the park. So, if that is like I said, I don't know a lot about the background of Neo Ultra Q, but it does sound like that's kind of what they want. It's like, once again, it's harkening back to the original Ultra Q, and that was harkening back to the Twilight Zone, which is like, you're not supposed to feel good after the episodes. You're supposed to get mind freaked for a bit.
Right, and I didn't mention this earlier when talking about Ultra Q, but I was actually just gonna leave it for its actual episode, but it pertains to what we're talking about. The original title for Ultra Q was called Unbalance.
Really?
Yeah, that was the original working title for Ultra Q, but was changed because a popular Olympic gold medalist at the time did a move that was his signature move called the Ultra C or something like that. I don't know which letter, but it was the Ultra C or something like that. And because that became such a popular term at the time, they changed it to Ultra Q, with Q being question. So the Ultra Question. I know, weird, right?
The Ultra Question. I know this one. It's T.
Like the drink?
No, the letter T.
Oh, the letter T. Okay.
Yeah. That's a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
That's
I'll
the
probably
question.
get flamed. I'll probably get flamed for not seeing it.
Well,
Is
the
that
answer
the
is
thing where
42. So
okay, yeah. So that is the thing that the 42 thing comes from.
which, that, by the way, that actually does have some association to each other. I don't want to get into Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but there's actually something to be explained about that. You might want to look it up. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's on the long list of things to watch at some point. But, you know, not enough time.
Not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, so Neo Ultra Q, I don't know how I feel about it, but I would recommend watching it at some point. Because I don't really like, I wouldn't say it's spooky. It's not really like scary. It's not intended to be like horror or anything. but I don't really like spooky things. Just by nature, I don't watch horror movies. I don't like that kind of stuff. I don't like gory things. It's not this show's not gory, but my point being is
It is gory if you don't like rocks.
I like bright and colorful things. I mean, I made a podcast about Ultraman, for Lord's sake.
Yeah, and we spent most of this episode talking about the interesting dark things in Ultraman.
Yeah, and it's just and the fact that I like actually enjoyed Nexus being like a tone that I don't normally like speaks how well the show is. But
you got to do it right.
Yeah, like I said, people have their own tastes, and if you like that kind of thing, you will dig the heck out of Neo Ultra Q.
But once again, it's kind of its own thing. Don't watch it expecting for the Ultraman experience.
Right, it's its own thing, and it's like I said, I've only watched a couple episodes of the original Ultra Q, but from what I'm told about it, it feels like a season 2. It feels like just more of the same. So if any of the original Ultra Q is as weird as Neo Ultra Q, I'm in for a ride. That's to say the least. But yeah, so watch that if you're into that kind of stuff.
Or don't. We're not your parents.
Yeah, I don't care. Do what you want. But as far as new gen...
Oh yeah, here we go. Now this is where we go into new gen, right?
This is when we get into mine and yours bread and butter. I've seen all of this. You've seen most of this.
To be fair, all I need to do is finish Taiga.
Yeah. Yeah, all you have to do is finish Taiga, and we'll have episodes on each of these series where we talk more in depth. But we're just gonna kind of breeze through this a little bit. So, like I said, there's a huge lawsuit that was going on. They didn't really have a lot of financial resources to put toward a new show. Things happened. They eventually got bought by Bandai of Japan. So Bandai has a majority hold share in Subaraya. So this is when the shows get more toyetic, so to speak. There was always toys that they sold. They always sold vinyls of the Ultras, figures, costumes, masks, toys of the planes and stuff like that, monster vinyls.
If it was something that you could hold in your hand or play around with, they made it.
Yeah, like Beta Spark or Beta Capsule, transformation devices. They always sold stuff. You know, there was always merchandise to take advantage of. And the people who hate on the new gen because they said, I hear this quite a lot. They don't like the new gen because it's just a quote unquote toy commercial. But yet they completely ignore the fact that everything prior to it did the same thing. It's just this one is more of it.
Like, and I get it. I do understand. Because like it's way worse in Kamen Rider.
Yeah.
So I kind of appreciate how toned down it is in Ultraman. But even then, it's like, just... I wish it wasn't, but it's a necessary evil because it pays the bills. Without it, we wouldn't be getting any new content at all.
That's absolutely the case. Absolutely. The show exists because of the toy sales. If it didn't have the toy sales, we wouldn't have the show. So... people want to complain about Bandai pushing toys in the show, but if they didn't, they wouldn't have the show.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's the necessary evil of keeping Ultraman alive, at least currently.
Yeah, it might change at some point, but you also have to think, like, for the Showa era, those were primetime television shows. Those were the family gathered around on Sunday night and watched these shows because that was what was popular at the time. But they fell out of fashion. They weren't as popular as they used to be. So they leaned on other forms of
revenue.
to get the show made,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so this is when Ginga starts, and I do not have the time of day to sit here and give my spiel on Ginga. That's its own episode.
It truly is. There's a heck of a lot of things we could talk about in Ginga, and we will. Oh, we will, because I like Ginga. I like Ginga a lot. But please do yourselves a favor. If you've never seen Ginga, or you've never really seen Ultraman, do not start with Ginga.
Absolutely. I love Ginga with all of its flaws. And I love Ginga S even more.
Arguably, you can start with Ginga S, but I would still say watch Ginga first.
I disagree. I mean, I see what you're saying, but I completely disagree with skipping over Ginga, because you get more enjoyment out of Ginga S.
No, I agree. I agree, but I'm saying if you've never seen Ultraman and you just really, really want to watch a Ginga series, I would say Ginga is skippable, but you will definitely get more out of Ginga S if you don't.
Yeah. But if we're pulling hairs at that point, I would just say start with a different show.
Start with X. It literally comes after Ginga, and it's a great show.
Yeah. So Ginga and Ginga S is where they start with a toy gimmick, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So up until that point, they sold the vinyls were always the best sell. The vinyl figures were always the best sellers of merchandise for Ultraman, the franchise. So they were like, well, why don't we use our best seller as our toy gimmick? So they shrunk the vinyls, because before that the vinyls were 6 inches, and they shrunk them down to about 4 inches, and they called them Spark Dolls, and they put a little chip in the bottom of the foot that Ginga's transformation device could read, and he could utilize as powers, etc. This borrows from very much what Bandai does with Super Sentai and Kamen Rider. Starting with Double, I would say, is when the gimmicks started getting ramped up.
Well,
and
hold on,
they exist prior. But I would say
no. I would argue, though, for that it doesn't really start until O's, because as far as Double goes, like pretty much every prior season, you still had like your main item, and then later on you had the upgrade, and those were 2 different things you had to buy. Like even Decade was like this, but Double wasn't really different, because the item that you buy for Double was self-contained. It came with all of the drives, like all of his power-up items. Like you only had 2 extra things to buy.
It didn't, though.
It did.
It did, as far as the complete, like the reissue came with all 4, but originally you had to buy the rod to get one of them, and then you had to buy the gun to get you had to buy the gun to get Trigger, and you had to buy the rod to get Metal.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Never mind. I guess it did start with Double.
Yeah, and also the additional that was when they started with the Legend gimmicks. Because they had about 10 plus of the Legend gimmicks of the memories, and then they had Dopant memories, and they made like about 100 of those things.
I never saw the Legend ones, but I did know about the evil ones.
No, there's definitely Legend Rider ones.
Yeah, they didn't do the Legend Rider. Well, at that time, the Legend Rider things didn't get released every year.
Yeah.
Because I think
not every year.
Because I think O's, they only had 1, and it was just Momotaro's.
No, the O's medals had a bunch of a bunch of the Legend Riders.
Oh, did they? Well, then maybe they just did. Weird.
Yeah, because they had a blue metal ring instead of the regular gold. Anyway, we're getting off in the weeds. Point being, Kamen Rider and Super Sentai. If you want to complain about the show, these Ultraman shows being too toyetic, give some Ultraman or give some Super Sentai and some Kamen Rider a try, and then come back to me and tell me if this show is too toyetic for you. Because Ultraman is the least toyetic out of all of them.
Agreed.
But that being said, the shows are still extremely, extremely enjoyable. And because we come from that background of Kamen Rider and Super Sentai, I don't think it bothers us as much as it would bother someone who was coming from, example, like a Showa Ultraman, and they're trying to get into the newer stuff, and it's such a jarring thing. I think it's less jarring for us because it feels like a tone down as opposed to a tone up. Would you agree with that?
I would definitely agree with that statement. Like all the complaints that the older generation people have that watch this about being too toy centric. I mean, it's not something we can ever say we'll have that perspective of because it's always been present for what we were introduced to.
Yeah.
And if anything, for us, it's less.
Yeah, and also it just doesn't bother me.
No,
because like you could say it's a toy commercial. I wouldn't disagree, but I love toys. You know, I like being sold toys.
It's like, wait, I can get product, give product.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, I love that. I want that. You know, it's like, I don't mind the toy commercial aspect of it. It doesn't bother me any. And I can see where it would bother some people, but it just doesn't bother me any. But that being said, we got Ginga S, and then we move on to X. And kind of like what I said in our introduction episode, these series exponentially get better as we go on. They're finding their stride.
I don't know about that.
With some lulls. But speaking about Ginga to X is a far improvement. X to Orb is a far improvement. Orb to Jeed is a far improvement to some. So some people would disagree with that, but
I mean, that's arguable.
It's arguable, but the quality does increase and get better as it goes on. So Ginga and Ginga S, you follow a character. It's very much a small story. Ginga S introduces the team aspect like we get in previous Ultraman series. X is where we really pick up the team aspect and we really get back to the original style of Ultraman with a team. The host for the Ultraman is a member of the team. It really digs into what it used to be like. And then it's also a anniversary series, or it's at least treated as an anniversary series. I don't know exactly where it fits timeline wise, but you do get a lot of returning Ultramen in it, which is a really fun ride, especially when you know them, you know? You don't need to know them, but you get more out of it when you do. Orb follows, and this is really where we pick up the anniversary aspect.
Oh, well, before we move on, one thing I do want to say about Orb, as far as like we've been saying which ones you should start with.
X, you mean, or Orb?
Oh, Orb, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So, like, I started with Orb. Gaim started with Orb. it's not recommended that you start with Orb, so it's really like 50-50 up in the air because it is an anniversary season, right?
Yeah, I would let's leave recommendations towards the end.
Yeah.
Let's get through the rest of this, and then I actually had lists of what we would consider recommendations for people who are looking to start a series. So
Right.
let's get through the rest of these real quick, and then we'll jump into what we would recommend someone to start with.
Sure.
Yeah, so Orb, like you said, is an anniversary season. And I started with Orb. I personally would recommend starting with Orb, but I can see where some people would not be able to get into Ultraman with Orb. For some reason, it took you a second go to get into it. And
I
I've
mean,
also
well, it was more so the first time you showed it to me, I didn't have a way to watch it, and
right.
I wasn't enthralled by it in the first few episodes because I was trying not to even watch Ultraman at all at the time. I believe we talked about this.
Yes, we
But
did.
by the time we circled back to it, Mill Creek had started doing their releases, and I
It was
think
more convenient for you.
it was more convenient for me. I had a way to watch it, and I think I watched the whole show, including the specials, in like a week.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned that in our first episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Orb is a really good show. It was very popular, and they did a prequel series, and then after that we got Jeed. Jeed is one of my favorite because Ultraman Zero comes back and is a secondary character in the show, and the host of Zero is just a fantastic actor. I don't want to give away anything about that, but if you haven't seen that, man, that
Yeah.
dude's a great actor.
It was a fun show to watch. I really liked it.
Um,
Arguably, I probably could have started with that one instead, too.
yeah, and some people would recommend you start with that instead. But
Once again, we'll get
like
back into that.
right. After that is Rube. That was actually the one you started with, like we mentioned in the previous episode. And I wouldn't say you should start with it.
Well, I didn't start with it. It was my first one I watched as it was releasing.
It was the first one you finished through all the way through as well.
I finished. Did I? Oh, I think I did. You're right. It's forgettable. Not really, but I have mixed opinions on my own opinions of Orb. I mean, not Orb, Rube.
Yeah.
I don't hate it.
And we'll get into this when we do our Rube episode, but I actually want to rewatch it before we do that, is because I've heard a lot of other opinions on Rube. For example, the Science Patrol, the guys over there, they absolutely love the series because they said it's a satire of the Ultraman formula. And when I was watching it, I was still fairly new to Ultraman. I had seen a lot less. And I felt that they were missing a lot of opportunities. There was certain turns that they did that I didn't like. And I just felt cheated by the show. I think the reason why I was so harsh on it was because I was hoping it to be this grand Orb-like, Jeed-like show that would get you into Ultraman, so you would want to watch it because this was being the show that you was watching as it was coming out. I wanted it to be amazing so that you were impressed by it. But because it was what it was, it left kind of like a lackluster taste in my mouth. So I feel like if I go back and rewatch it, knowing what's going on, so I don't have unrealistic expectations for it, and also looking at it as a satire, I think I would actually enjoy it a lot more. So I want to, before we do our Rube episode, I want to go back and rewatch it just to see if that's the case.
Yeah, that's probably very fair too. Like, I mean, a lot of things can happen when you want something to be one way and then it's not, and your opinion or perception of it can be skewed.
Yes.
So, like, we had a somewhat negative experience with it, but that's due largely in perspective due to expectations, which are bad sometimes when going into things. Like, I would say it's always bad to have expectations, but definitely can lessen an experience.
When you go in with unrealistic expectations, it can sour an experience for sure.
Yeah, I will agree to that. And that's I am like 90% sure that's what happened with that show for us.
Yeah, and the thing is too, I actually really like the characters. Like, I love the characters. I have no problems with the characters. I think they're endearing and fantastic actors, and made me feel like emotion through their performance.
My favorite character got done dirty.
What?
My favorite character got done dirty.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And like I said, let's not get into that.
Yeah, that's once again, that's into, it's gonna have its own episode. We'll definitely talk about it. But for now,
we're going to switch to Taiga, which
I haven't finished.
Was the series that followed directly behind that. And I've seen the show, and like we said in our introduction episode, it was because of the situation surrounding our ability to watch it. It left a lackluster impression on me. I didn't dislike it. It just didn't have the impact on me. And very much like Rube, I want to do a rewatch of this show before doing an episode on it to see if my impression changes.
Well, we've kind of been doing a rewatch because you've been helping me finish this show.
Yes. So, like, after we're done with that, I would have done my rewatch and do the episode.
Which hopefully, isn't it projected maybe that Taiga's going to get its release from Mill Creek this year? Or is that just speculation?
That's just speculation. There's no way of knowing.
That's true.
You know, I told you about the when the deal was made, it wasn't out yet, so it's not technically
part
in
of
the one.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about this now.
So we'll have to wait for whenever that gets re-upped and stuff like that. Well, it'll come. I completely have faith that they will release it. It's just I don't know exactly when. But after Taiga, we get to the most recent series, Ultraman Z.
Yes, and Z, for those of you who didn't realize, Ultraman has done, or at least Tsuburaya Company had done a really, really good thing that was very, in my opinion, healthy for the shows. They started pushing official releases for them on YouTube. Now, they were timed releases, so unfortunately, by the time you're watching this podcast, it's no longer available.
Right.
But this does give you some heads up for future content as what's coming next, which we may have a name for. We're pretty sure we do. They've gotten the trademark on it.
Right.
Right, but when it starts getting released, hopefully they'll do the same thing and they'll release it on their official YouTube channel, and it'll stay up for about 2 weeks. So that's what they did with Zet. It was very easily accessible, and from my understanding, it was very well received by not only the fan base, but it drew in lots of new people.
Yeah. And you, dear listener, might actually be here because you watched Zet and absolutely loved it and wanted to learn more. I absolutely loved Zet myself,
That was good. I
And
really liked it too.
yeah, I absolutely loved that series. And
Though, would you say I, I don't know. Here, we'll talk about this in a minute. Continue.
no, go ahead.
There's a character in it who, well, I guess there's really a couple characters in that one that you don't have to know who they are, but it definitely enhances knowing the story if you know who they are. You know what I mean?
Right, but no, I know exactly what you're talking about. But speaking from not my experience, but from other people's experiences with Zet,
Mm-hmm.
I know of at least 5 or 6 brand new, just personally, I know 5 or 6 people who got into Ultraman because of Ultraman Z and have doubled back and watched Orb Jeet and dived into other series because of Ultraman Z.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I would, being the person that I am, I like to watch things from the beginning to the end so that I see all of the little things that sprinkle in. But Ultraman's really hard to do that with because it's so wide.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to do when you're trying to gravitate towards finding a new show to watch. But yeah,
But yeah, so that's the brief synopsis of Ultraman and the order in which they come in, and the Ultraman adjacent shows.
right.
And so
Um
currently, do we want to go ahead and name drop the trademark name?
oh well yeah. I was gonna leave all the news for the next
Well, it's not
episode. But
really
yeah.
news. It's just a what we think's coming next, or what we're
Well
planning.
yeah, that's true. We got the trademark for the next Ultraman show, Ultraman Trigger. That's all we know. That's its name. So we'll figure that out. I did neglect to mention several movies, several miniseries,
Oh, you did. You left out
several
nice. You jerk.
several web series, several little things sprinkled in between that whole expanse that we will intend to cover at some point. And there's also a Netflix anime that we've neglected to mention. It's a great show, by the way.
I loved it. We're getting a season 2.
Yeah, and that should be out fairly soon.
Oh, really?
It's this year at some point.
Is it this year? Okay, that's hype.
It was supposed to be last year, but COVID and all that.
Look, there are innumerable things at this point that didn't happen last year.
Right. But we're supposed to be getting that this year. But yeah, so let's finish this off by kind of saying, what would we recommend someone to get into?
Do we want to do subjectively and then objectively, or
Either way.
either way? All right. I really liked Zet.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. I think Orb might be my favorite Ultraman. Suit design, Ginga's my favorite. But like overall, I think I would have to say a really good starting point, at least because that's where I really got into the series. I'd say start with Orb. I like Orb.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't necessarily break down subjective or objective opinions. I more or less tried to break it up by what kind of things you like, because
Yes.
with this show being such a different take each time,
Mm-hmm.
you get different types of people drawing towards different series. So if you are like a kaiju Godzilla fan of the older stuff, you're definitely going to want to start with the older Showa era series, because it's the most like what you like. You know, it's the most similar to the movies that you already enjoy. So you're getting things that you will like. If you are like us and you come from a general Toku background of Kamen Rider or Super Sentai, then I would recommend Orb. Start with Orb. You're going to understand the general convention of how the show runs, because it's very familiar to you.
Mm-hmm.
And Orb is just a good show in general. Orb, Jeed, and Zet, they're all great starting points. And for those people who are new to the Henshin hero genre or tokusatsu in general, but you kind of come from, well, let's say Doctor Who, I would actually say Neo Ultra Q is very similar in tone and execution to like the Moffat era Doctor Who.
Huh, I wasn't expecting that parallel to be drawn.
And I would actually draw the parallel of the original Ultra Q to Classic Who. Mainly because it's just Classic Who feels like that early Twilight Zone kind of whimsical, weird stuff going on kind of show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I kind of get what you mean.
I've only seen a few episodes of Classic Who. I was a fan of the Tennant and the Matt Smith era of Doctor Who, and those definitely feel related to Neo Ultra Q, just in the scenarios you find the characters in and how they have to deal with extraordinary circumstances. So if you come from that kind of fan base and you're not quite ready for a transforming superhero, that might be a good bridge for you. But overall, it really just depends on your taste as a viewer for which ones you're going to like, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How about going through the wiki and clicking on the images? You know, see, oh, this is what Tiga looks like. This is what Dinah looks like. This is what Nexus looks like.
I mean,
find a suit that speaks to you and then just try it, you know?
I think there's a far shorter list of things we would say you might want to shy away from starting with. Because like I said, my favorite suit, probably Ginga. Why? Because it has that cyan blue color glow, and his name literally means galaxy. These are big check marks that tick off for me. But I would definitely say watch Ginga after you watch something else, because there are certain problems with Ginga that we will discuss later.
Right.
So
yeah, so overall, just you know what you like.
Yes.
I don't know what you like. You know what you like. So I hope that what we kind of illustrated gives you some sort of direction as to figure out which direction you want to go with for finding a new Ultraman series to watch. And if you were completely new to this, I hope we at least illuminated a little bit, and that you have a little bit of a understanding of what this franchise is. And hopefully you'll find a series that you really like to enjoy.
So to answer the question, what is Ultraman? Big man from space fuses with human to become Ultraman. Although his name's already Ultraman before he comes, so not quite true. Wow, cool. All that, and I still got it wrong. Let's go.
You're good, dude. You're good. But yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed that. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at A to Z Podcast.
Yeah, smash that bell, slap that heart, and re-ding those dangers, so we can to keep up. If you want, we have an email address that you can send us an email to, and we may or may not read it on screen. Well, what is that? What's that link?
That will be A to Z podcast@gmail.com. And if you prefer to listen to your podcasts on YouTube, we also have a YouTube channel. So go and give that a subscribe and click that bell. Ringle dingle ding the bell. Climb the steps. All that jazz that they tell you to do on the YouTubes.
Yeah. And if you prefer getting your news from Really Loud Birds, we also have a Twitter, which we do. Well, we put notifications out when we have a new episode up, and we sometimes retweet Toku news. So
that's right.
You can
and
go there as well.
Yeah. Also, we are now on a lot more podcatchers, I think is what they're called. Platforms. Yeah. When we did our first episode, we knew we would be on Anchor, and we hope to be on everything else, but pretty much we're on anything you want to listen to us on at this point. Most of you seem to listen to us on Spotify, which is fantastic. Go ahead, do that if you want. I am under the impression we are on Apple Podcasts, but since I don't have an Apple device, I can't exactly check that. But I am under the impression that we are on that. So if you are listening to us on that, send us an email, let us know that.
Let us know, because I too do not own Apple products. So we assume it's on there. If somebody can tell us, I'd appreciate it.
I'm told it's on there, but I can't confirm that.
And when we say we're told it's on there, we're told by the program that it's on there. No person has told us it's on there yet.
That's correct. But yeah, so we're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, all that jazz. Also, if you prefer to listen to us on Podcast Addict, which is actually my app of choice, we are there too. So yeah, just go ahead, follow us, and also email us. We want to hear from you. There's actually a fairly decent number of listeners already, and I was actually shocked by that. I see you people in Malaysia and Singapore and Australia. I love you. Thank you for listening.
That's our homies from different area codes.
That's right. So we have been A to Z. Are you done? You got anything else you want to throw at us?
I have to throw very hard because, as you've said, we have listeners in Malaysia.
That's right.
But super appreciate all of you guys. Like, I was very shocked that we reached that far out. So I think that's really cool. Like, I'm really happy to see international A to Z.
That's right.
But thank you all for listening. You are the best. I hope you have a great day, week, month. Let's make this year better than the last one, and let's do it by all working together for a brighter tomorrow.
That's right. And be sure to watch out for the next one.